بجنگیم 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 تا خون در رگ ما تا خون در رگ ما خمینی 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 همیشه رهبر ما همیشه رهبر ما خمینی ارتش 20 میلیونی خمینی ارتش 20 میلیونی گوش به فرمان تو
In a sentence, it wasn't about us. It was an Iranian fight. Now, we became part of it, and by our own actions, we let ourselves be part of it. But I had some of our captors at the embassy, the people who were holding us, say that to me quite clearly, that this is not about you. This is not about the United States. We have other quarrels to settle.
Well, for the first 2 or 3 days, anyway, we thought it would be resolved as the situation at the time of the first attack in February had been resolved. And we thought we had a role to play in that. And to a degree, we did. I mean, we were talking to the foreign minister. He resigned, and the government, provisional revolutionary government, fell within 48 hours. But thereafter, we talked on the phone to Ayatollah Beheshti, who was a member of the Revolutionary Council, about, you know, how it might be possible to resolve this thing. And you may be aware that one of the things Carter did right off at the outset was to tap Ramsey Clark, who had been Attorney General under Lyndon Johnson, to go to Tehran. And one of the conversations that we had with Ayatollah Beheshti was about the aircraft that they were coming in and the tail number and the sorts of data that they would need at the airport in Tehran when they got there.
I was summoned to the White House by President Carter and Secretary of State Vance and asked to go to Tehran, and the Revolutionary Council had agreed and arranged. And I carried a letter to Ayatollah Khomeini, which said, in essence, we have differences. Let's talk about them on a basis of mutual respect and settle the issues that divide us. We have much in common and we should work together.
اونها در مرحله اول این رو منتشر کردن که به یک نتیجه برسند. چرا؟ برای اینکه قضیه ریاست جمهوری در اونجا مطرحه. یعنی کارتر برد و باختش روی گروگان هاست. روی آزادی و عدم آزادی گروگان ها برد و باخت او در انتخابات آمریکا مطرحه. وقتی که اینجور بشه اونها پیام رو میدن. بلکه میدونم مال عدم شناخت حتی شخص امام و انقلاب ایرانه. میگن حالا ما این رو میدیم بلکه به یه پیروزی رسیدیم و گروگان‌ها یک تحصیلاتی نسبت بهشون فراهم شد. مثلا به دست دولت افتاد. مثلا آزاد شدن. مثلا امام فرمودن که مجلس شورای ملی یه مرتبه گفتن حالا برن. این احتمالاتی است که ولو احتمال ضعیفه ولی چون محتمل قوی هست روی اینها اونها حساب باز میکنن. لذا بعد گفتن پیش خودشون فکر میکنن که اگر منتشر نشد فبه ها، اگر منتشر شد ما تکذیب میکنیم. چرا؟ برای اینکه نه آرمی تو کاره، نه شماره‌ای تو کاره، نه دستخطی هست، نه امضایی هست، بلکه یک پیامی است که توسط یه نفر دیگه دادن و متن پیام فرانسه است و بناس متن پیام هم باز روش تصمیم گرفته بشه و دولت سوئیس باید بالاخره موضع خودش رو روشن کنه. یعنی معنا نداره کاردار سوئیس در تهران بیاد این رو ببره بده به آقای رئیس جمهور و ببره بده به آقای وزیر امور خارجه و بعد صریحا تکذیب کنن و بعد بیان تکذیب خودشون رو تکذیب کنن. تکذیب خودشون رو هم همون جور که اون رو رسمی کردن این کار رو هم باید رسمی بکنن و اگر این کار رو نکنن باید توضیح بدن و اگر توضیح ندادن قطعا وزیر امور خارجه ما و رئیس جمهور که دیدن کاردار رو حتما روی این معنا عکس العمل نشون میدن.
Our plane, which was Air Force One, was fitted out with 55 seats for the hostages. We were greeted by a message in Istanbul from the Revolutionary Council that we would not be received in Air Force One because there was a fear that somehow it would bomb the embassy or anyway, the plane was refused entry. And we were told to come in a smaller plane. So we had a smaller plane. Attorney General Ramsey Clark and I were about to board the smaller plane, and we received another message that the government of Bazargan had fallen. It was very clear that an official airplane wouldn't work. So we were about to board a Turkish airliner to Tehran, and we were told that the government had fallen and we could not be received. And it was very evident that the Revolutionary Council was at war with itself, and there was chaos in the government.
Can't remember whether it was Istanbul or Ankara getting ready to depart for Iran. Ayatollah Khomeini, who was then in Qom, took to the airwaves and said that if Clark wanted to come to Tehran, he was certainly welcome to do so, but nobody should talk to him. And I think it was at that point that I realized, all of us realized, that this wasn't going to be a crisis of a few days, but rather something that was going to last quite a bit longer, although I didn't think it would last 15 months.
We were helped by many inside of Iran, including telephone operators who kept the lines open. And we talked night and day with our contacts in Bazar, in the Revolutionary Council, and in the remains of government. We got 11 hostages out. This was through the intervention of Yasser Arafat and the PLO. It's a little-known fact, but the Yasser Arafat and the PLO were very helpful to us, with the women and the blacks.
دوران 25 ساله و یا بیشتر در ایران رژیم محمد رضا پهلوی که تمام ملت ایران معتقدند بحث نشانده دولت آمریکا بوده، تمام جنایاتی که در اینجا مرتکب شد و بعد هم سرانجام این رژیم سرنگون شد، ملت ایران به دنبالش طبق اطلاعات قطعی که به دست آورده بودند یقین کردند که سفارتخانه آمریکا یک لانه جاسوسیه و مرکز توطئه علیه ملت ایرانه و از اینجا دخالت در امور ملت ایران میشه. و بعد از اون که اینجا تصرف شد و دیپلمات هایی که در اینجا بودن به نام دیپلمات یا واقعا بودن بعضشون، اینها دستگیر شدن و شما هم در بین اونها رهبر انقلاب اسلامی ایران امام خمینی پیامی صادر فرمودند و به ما دستور دادند که زنهایی رو که در اینجا گروگان هستند و مسلم نیست که در توطئه جاسوسی شرکت داشتند، اینها رو آزادشون کنند. به ملاحظه فرمان امام و دستوری که صادر کردن همه مملکت ایران منتظرترین.
What would you say they can do to release the hostages? They're going to return the deposed Shah?
The government, you mean?
Your government?
Yeah. I don't know whether or not they will return the Shah, but my impression is that the American people wouldn't like him there, and that he won't stay very long, if not even very happy in the United States.
Okay. And we know that they've been threatening us to an economical blockade. This has happened before in Cuba and it was unsuccessful. Do you think it will succeed in Iran?
Under the circumstances, I'm really not sure what America is thinking of right now. It's been 2 weeks since I've heard any news from home, and I don't know their opinions about the situation, and I don't know what they're doing to right the wrong. So I really, I don't know what to say. I don't know what they're thinking of right now, so I can't say what I think would happen in that case.
The United States tried every which way to send messages, to negotiate with people, but it was very difficult. Iran was still in a revolutionary state. Khomeini was trying to consolidate control. So it was very difficult for the United States to know who their interlocutor could be. It was very difficult to have direct talks. Some of the people who did speak with Americans were later executed. I'm thinking of the former foreign minister, Gabzadeh, was executed. Bani Sadr, of course, had to flee to France, was impeached. So it was not an easy thing to find Iranians in a position of authority that the United States could talk to.
We're hopeful that you find a solution about the hostages.
We are not coming as we have not the idea to interfere in any way. We are here to to collect better information about the Islamic Revolution. I think there's a lack of information, and we want to bridge this gap.
چرا بعد از چند روز تخلیه نکردن؟ چرا دانشجویان گروگان‌ها رو به شورای انقلاب تحویل ندادن؟ اینا چراهایی است که یک حلقه مفقوده‌ای وجود دارد. چرا اصرار بود بر این که گروگانگیری ادامه پیدا کنه تا کارتر انتخاب نشود؟ ارتباط این، یعنی نگه داشتن گروگان‌ها با علم به این که اگر گروگان‌ها رو در ایران نگه بدارن، دولت کارتر مجدداً انتخاب نخواهد شد و این لطمه سیاسی بزرگی برای کارتر خواهد بود. چرا این کار صورت گرفت؟ یک سوال بسیار بزرگی است.
این همون رازی است که ما رو هم گروگان خودش کرد و ما از اول اون رو نمیدونستیم.
And history is not what people think happened. History is what people think ought to have happened. So there is a certain amount of hindsight. But I think it's fair to say that the people who took the embassy, for the most part, didn't have any particular plan. There was a kind of ببینیم چی میشه.
One of the things you think about is, all right, how am I getting out of here? When is this going to end? And the basic Iranian demand was for the United States to return the Shah to Iran for trial. Well, we knew that wasn't going to happen, but the reaction was, what if the Shah really is sick? What if he dies? So we found out about 8 weeks after it happened that the Shah had died. Well, in a sense, good news, because we thought it was a precondition for our being released. But you find out 8 weeks late and you say, well, this wasn't the thing that worked. This wasn't the event that was going to trigger our release.
وقتی که یه گروهی وارد یه ساختمون میشن میتونن یه شرطی بذارن به اضافه یه زمان. میگن اگه مثلا شما شاه تحویل ندید ما 3 روز اینجا میمونیم یا یه هفته اینجا میمونیم و ممکنه شرط‌های دیگه هم بذارن. مثلا بگن اگه شاه تحویل ندیم ما نفرات اینجا رو زندانی میکنیم. یه همچین جمله‌ای توسط دانشجو بیان نمیشد. دانشجوها میگفتن که باید شاه تحویل بدیم. به عنوان یک شرط فقط مطرح میکردن. نمیگفتن ما گروگانا رو میدیم یا نمیدیم.
The students, and they really were students, who decided to basically make a point with the United States. The Shah came in, they were going to make a sort of revolutionary statement. And these were in many cases students coming out of the 1960s who knew about sit-ins and this whole idea that students rise up. They did it here at Columbia just a few years earlier than that. Came in and took over the whole campus, drove people out of their offices, occupied the office of the president, and so forth. It was a time of sort of revolutionary excitement. And so they were going to do this. They were going to come in, they were going to make a statement, they were going to be heard, and the Americans would have to listen to them and consider Iran's grievances toward the United States. You know, you can agree or disagree with that, but I certainly understand it. And that's in fact what the Americans thought was happening.
درست ساعاتی بعد از اینکه ما وارد سفارت امریکا شدیم، خب بالاخره سفارت امریکا بزرگترین سفارت یک کشور خارجی تو ایران بود. نمیشد دانشجوها واردش بشن و یهویی مثل بمب تو جامعه منفجر نشه. ساعت 1 و ساعت 2 بعد از ظهر رادیو سراسری ایران اعلام کرد. ما اطلاعیه دادیم و گفتیم سفارت امریکا رو به اشغال خودمون در آوردیم. چند ساعت که گذشت، رهبر انقلاب که بسیار مورد احترام مردم بود و محبوب مردم بود و در حقیقت مردم به او خیلی چهره کاریزمای او رو ستایش می‌کردند، به ما از طریق فرزندش آقای حاج احمد آقا خبر داد که جای خیلی مهمی رو شما اشغال کردید و این کار مورد تایید من هم هست.
شما می‌بینید که الان مرکز فساد امریکا را جوانها رفتن گرفتن و امریکایی هم که در اونجا بوده گرفتن و اون لانه فساد را به دست آوردن و امریکا هم هیچ غلطی نمیتونه بکنه و جوانها مطمئن باشن که امریکا هیچ غلطی نمیتونه بکنه. بی خود صحبت این که اگر دخالت نظامی، مگه امریکا میتونه دخالت نظامی در این مملکت بکنه؟ امکان براش نداره. تمام دنیا توجهشون الان به اینجاست. مگه امریکا میتونه مقابل همه دنیا بیسته و دخالت نظامی بکنه؟ غلط میکنه دخالت نظامی بکنه. نه ترسیدم. این تعبیری که جوانهای ما از روی باز احساسات جوانی کردن که اگر چنانچه امریکا بخواد دخالت نظامی بکند ما چه خواهیم کرد، اصلا این اگرش هم نباید بگن. امریکا عاجز از این است که دخالت نظامی در اینجا بکنه.
So we thought, okay, they're going to take the embassy, and then, as it happened in February earlier that year, the government will come in and say, okay, that's enough. You've made your point now. Get out. And instead, the government came in and said, good, we're with you.
سفارت را تبدیل می‌کنند به لانه جاسوسی. ملت ایران باید تحمل نکند و نکرد. دشمن ما را پناه دادند، به ما تعرض کردند و به ما اهانت کردند. پس متعرض همون قدرتی است که امروز با دستگاه‌های تبلیغاتی خود در جهان فریاد برمی آورد و از حقوق و قوانین نقض شده انسان سخن میگوید. ما در جواب میگوییم کدام قوانین رو میگویید؟ کدام یک از قوانین انسانی و بین المللی رو شما در طول زمان با ملت‌های تحت ستم و از جمله با خود ما محترم شده؟
اون جریانی که حالا جریان روحانی که شما میگید همشون بی اطلاع بودن از این ماجرا، سرانشون بی اطلاع بودن از ماجرا. به همین خاطر ما ادعای فرستادیم برای که اینا توجیه بکنیم. خب جریان روحانیت حاکم عمدتاً در شورای انقلاب شکل گرفته بودش. آقای دادمان که وزیر مرحوم راه و ترابری کشور ما هستن، ایشون رفتن شورای انقلاب همون روز ظهر و این مطلب رو به اطلاع آقای منتظری و بقیه روحانیون اونجا رسوندن. تا اونجا که خاطرم میاد آقای خامنه‌ای هم خارج از کشور بودن و تو فرودگاه مطلع شدن. یعنی اون جریانی که جریان روحانیت حاکم بر کشور ماست از این جریان بی اطلاع بودن.
اون دانشجویی که به اصطلاح اومد اقدام به این کار کرد و وارد سفارت شد، دیگه اون دانشجو نمیدونستیم، بلکه کسایی میدونستیم که در واقع باید جزئی از یک برنامه بزرگتر بود که امام در واقع مد نظر خودش قرار داد.
Khomeini saw this as the greatest opportunity to shut down the United States from any influence and at the same time to cut off any moderate opposition to his regime. So he hooked on to the students and used them and used our hostage-taking as a way to sustain his power and to actually legitimize his regime.
اسم خودمون گذاشته بودیم دانشجویان مسلمان پیرو خط امام. پیرو خط امام یعنی هر چی ایشون میگه ما باید تبعیت کنیم. لذا بنا به گفته این حرف امام ما دیگه اون برنامه‌ریزی قبلی خودمون رو فراموش کردیم، گفتیم هر چی امام دستور بده همین رو باید رعایت کنیم و اطاعت کنیم. لذا این قضایا دیگه همچنان که می‌دونید طولانی شد تا همون 444 روز.
Who took it out of their control? How did they get out of their control? I think this is not completely correct because it's very clear to me that many of the students enjoyed their headline status and enjoyed seeing themselves on the evening news around the world and enjoyed seeing themselves changed from ordinary engineering students at the Polytechnic to headline figures.
در حقیقت دیگه تصمیم گیر در مورد ختم کردن یا ختم نکردن یا کی پایان دادنش دیگه تصمیم گیرش خیلی ما نبودیم. اون جریان اجتماعی بود. نمیخوام بگم ما نبودیم یعنی امام بودا. اصلا اون جریان اجتماعی بود که ایجاد شد. به طوری که موقعی که این کار شروع شد در شاید 3-4 ماه اول اینجا اغراق شاید نباشه اگر بگم همیشه مثلا 1 میلیون جمعیت دور سفارت بود.
And suddenly the people went from being student protesters to become jailers. They were running a prison. And they weren't prepared for that. They hadn't even imagined such a thing. And now they had this sort of permanent job.
ما یه حرکت اعتراضی داشتیم ولی خودمون گروگانا شده بودیم.
The spiritual leader of that small group, Koinyan, he is the evil incarnate in my view, because he's the one who led that small group at the beginning and presumably persuaded them to continue their effort beyond their initial stage. All I can say is that I knew that was their claim, and I don't think they didn't hold to it. They became emboldened rather quickly. They had power. They had the passion of the streets. They had made that, and they were suddenly power holders themselves. I think very quickly they wanted to keep that up.
Suddenly, political forces larger than these students themselves began to kick in, and political figures began to make political calculations of how they could benefit from this confrontation with the United States. Politicians always benefit from having enemies. And I think my interpretation is that political figures, Khomeini preeminent among them, but not alone among them, made a calculation that this confrontation could serve their political interests and consolidate their position in power and create what Khomeini called a second revolution that would help to solidify their control over power at a time when there were many contending forces for power, leftists and rightists and secular forces, and there was a struggle for power going on within Iran, and the embassy seizure became an important dimension in that struggle for power. And I don't think the students, most of them will tell you, really anticipated how that would play out. They also didn't know how the United States would react.
After a while, it seemed to me that these people were people I knew, not in the sense of knew them personally, but knew what they were like. They reminded me a lot of the university students I had had before, in the sense that they were book smart, they could study their thermodynamics and their math, and they'd obviously studied very hard because getting into universities in Iran is very competitive. I mean, for the engineering schools, 1 in 70, 1 in 80 maybe gets accepted. So you don't get into these universities without studying. In that sense, they were book smart. World experience, 0. And many came from smaller towns and rather conservative families. Places like Nishapur, Kazarun, Miane, all of these places. And I had seen students like this when I was in Shiraz. Many of them had come from the smaller towns of Fars province, Kazarun, Darab, Abadeh, very smart. They had come to Shiraz, and their home values and their hometown values clashed very often with what they found at the university. University of Shiraz at that time was run on a kind of American system. It wasn't completely American, it wasn't completely European, it wasn't completely Iranian, but it had American influences. And a lot of the Iranian professors had studied in the United States. And its ethos was quite open and quite pluralistic. I mean, it looked at ideas, it attempted to analyze different ways of looking at things, and that kind of value sometimes clashed with the values that the students brought from home. And I saw that from time to time.
The thing that was so incredible was the almost paranoia of the students and the student guards. They actually had cameras in the bathrooms. And I said to myself, this is just, they really believed, and I remember as a Peace Corps volunteer, this may sound funny, Iranians loved James Bond, Sef Haft. That was the big deal. And they thought that we Americans were Sef Haft. And I used to tell them we're just as stupid as everybody else, you know? We don't have any special telephones in our shoes or whatever. So they were so paranoid about us. They believed that we had some superpower somewhere. Why would you actually film us in the bathrooms? Now, there were many things I said to the students that I wouldn't say on tape about how I thought of them, concerning them watching us in the bathroom. But it's just a sample of the incredible paranoia. To me, that more than anything else was the issue. And also, I think there was a fear of us even though we were the captives, somehow there was this thing that either they felt some sort of shame or they also felt that we had something up our sleeves.
یکی از این آقایون علیرغم همه تلاش‌های ما تونست مخفیانه رگای خودشو بزنه، رگای دستشو، که ما بلافاصله اینو کشف کردیم، از حالتش فهمیدیم کاری کرده، پتو کنار زدیم، کشف کردیم، بردیم بیمارستان امام خمینی، اونجا مثلا کاملا جراحی کردیم، بخیه زدیم رگ‌ها رو، برگردوندیم. مدت‌های مدیدی دو تا از دوستان من در داخل اتاق ایشون می‌خوابیدن، ایشون رو در بهداری اونجا ایزوله کرده بودیم و 2 نفر به طور منظم مراقب بودن که به این آسیبی نرسه تا بهبود پیدا کرد و برگشت به جمع بقیه گهمان.
That was so long ago that I'd basically forgotten it. I mean, I started forgetting it the day I left Iran. But different hostages had different experiences. I was set aside or, kept apart from other people because I spoke the language, because I'd been a political officer, and because I seemed to know too many people in the Iranian government, even in the revolutionary government. I had a lot of friends in that government. And so for the Iranian revolutionaries, I was somewhat of a mystery. I'd been there a very long time, longer than almost anybody else of the Americans. And again, they assumed I was something more than I actually was. Conditions in prison, no matter where you are, in whatever country you are never pleasant. First, there's the restraint. You can't leave your cell. In my case, there was the fact that I was in solitary confinement, that it was incredibly boring much of the time. And of course, I would lose my temper and tell the Iranians what I really thought of them, which always earned me extra punishments. But I just did it.
He knew Iran as well as any of us did, although several of my colleagues we were not without knowledge, without Persian competence, without Farsi competence, every word, but he had more than most, and he knew Iran very well, particularly because of his tour up in Tabriz, where he was physically badly treated and risked his life one day with a noose around his neck. I'm sure he has told you that. He, on the other hand, he didn't like how he was being treated, but he understood, I think, better than most, why the Iranian students, that group, students in quotes, young Iranians between the ages of 18 and 34, 35, that's the way I usually characterize them. He said, I know how they felt. They didn't like the way the Shah had run the country. They didn't like the way the United States seemed to be so totally identified with the Shah and not with Iran as such. He knew, Mike did, a good many, not least of the Iranian cleric community, particularly one cleric, senior leader, again, whose name slips my mind, but Mike could tell you very quickly who that family was. But he knew that. So, yeah, I can understand that he would feel the way he did. Damn it, what they're doing to me is totally wrong, and I'm going to get him. If I can possibly get at him, I'll get at him. But I know what you're doing and why you're doing it. I accept that.
Perhaps the worst thing about it, or the most ugly thing about it, was how it violated the deepest and most ancient traditions of Iran itself, which is that you may not like the guest in your house, but the one thing you do not do is mistreat him. You may ask him to leave politely, but you do not mistreat that person. And I mean, in all of my interactions with Iranians, I never, ever found someone who would do that. I made that same point, by the way, to Ayatollah Khamenei.
حالتون خوبه؟ خیلی ممنون. موفق باشید. مثل اینکه شما خوب فارسی صحبت می‌کنید.
بله، باید صحبت کنیم دیگه. 6 ماه اینجا که باید یاد گرفته باشیم.
قبلا هم یاد گرفته بودید.
بله.
خب چطور وضعیتون؟
همینطور که می‌بینی دیگه.
خب از لحاظ وضع
He came to see us in April of 1980 to emphasize the idea that this is a very ugly action that they have undertaken, and it's an action that it violates every norm of their own culture. You know, we would say, if you don't like our policy, if you do not agree with our policy, you have, as a country, you have every right to cut relations and throw us out. We will not stay here 1 minute longer than you want. But that less, for some reason, I think on one side, people were almost drunk on their own words and got carried away. And the victims of all this were not us, but were the Iranian people themselves.
چند وقت شما ایران بودید؟
من قبلا 4 سال ایران بودم. تو دانشگاه شیراز بودم. اونجا تدریس میکردم.
تدریس میکردید؟
بله.
چی تدریس میکردید؟
زبان. برای 12 سال پیش.
بعد مراجعت کردید امریکا و بعد برگشتید، بله؟
بله، بعد رفتم آمریکا، بعدش هم شهریور سال گذشته دوباره اومدم ایران.
بله. شهریور 58
میشه. بله.
خب کلا بچه‌ها که اینجا هستن فکر می‌کنم میزبان‌های بدی نباشن.
والا یه اشکالی که داره اینه که خیلی تعارفی هن. البته این که از خصوصیت ایرانی‌ها هستن و وقتی که مهمون میاد دلشون نمیخواد که مهمونشون برن اصلا. هی میخوان مهمونشون نگه دارن، هی بیشتر بمونن. منم میگم بس، میگن نه آقا بیشتر بمونی. من میگم بس، میگن زوده. بیشتر بمونی. این تعارفی زیادی بعضی موقع آدم یه کمی ناراحت میشه.
ملول میشه. البته اینا هیچ دلشون نمیخواد شما بمونید اینجا. برعکس میگه که من اطلاع دارم هم بچه‌ها و هم همه ملت ایران، چون این بچه‌ها هم خودشون نیستن، اینا در حقیقت یه نموداری از احساسات مردمه. این دلشون نمیخواد شما اینجا باشید، برعکس دلشون میخواد که هر چه زودتر شما برید. منتها خب این کلیدش دست اینها نیست، دست ما هم نیست، دست اون کسانی است که حاضر نیستند به خواسته به حق یک ملت جواب بدن. این تصدیق میکنید شما که محمد رضا پهلوی باید بیاد اینجا محاکمه بشه؟
من حرفی ندارم در این مورد.
یعنی فکر میکنم هر آدم منصفی این مسئله رو خیلی روشن میتونه بفهمه. اون مجرمه، باید بیاد اینجا خب محاکمه بشه.
تو اون که شکی نیست، یعنی اون در مجرم بودن اون که شکی نیست. منتها خب مسئله ماها هستیم فعلا. فکر کنم این مسئله رو مشکل کرد.
اونها بیان و شما هم بتونید برگردید سر خون زندگیتون، برید و در وطن خودتون باز به کارها و خدمات خودتون مشغول باشید.
اتفاقا من به بارها به بچه‌ها گفتم موقعی که ایران بودم، هم اون بار قبلی و این بار مخصوصا این بار، هیچ از نظر برخورد با ایران هیچ اشکال و ناراحتی نداشتم. مردمان بسیار مهربان و مهمون دوست هستن و هیچ ناراحتی نداشتن. مخصوصا از این موقعی که اومدم، یعنی بعد از انقلاب.
همای 0321 از برد.
توجه علامتی که همتون میشنوید اعلام خطر یا وضعیت قرمز است و معنی و مفهوم آن این است که حمله هوایی انجام خواهد شد. محل کار خود را ترک و به پناهگاه بروید.
در این میون عراق هم به ایران حمله کرد. شهریور سال 59 یعنی در حقیقت سپتامبر 1980 عراق به ایران حمله کرد.
شنیدم بزن.
I'm almost sure the only reason why we ever did get out was because of the Iran-Iraq war. The Iranian regime needed to get out of the box it was in. The embargoes were all over the place. The hostage situation made it impossible for Iran to have any legitimate opportunity to get any arms from anywhere. So we were now a liability. That was the real issue. We became a liability to them. They wanted to get rid of us. And so they had to make this deal as quickly as possible.
I personally was delighted when the war started. And to this day, I feel grateful to Saddam Hussein, because if he had not actually sent an army into Iran to invade it, the chances are good I'd still be sitting in some prison in Iran. It was a cold shower for Iran. They thought they could do anything and that there were no repercussions. They learned. They had their political hands slapped very, very soundly.
You remember that Mr. Tabatabai arrived in Bonn, Germany at about, the 12th of September or something like that. And for the first time, the United States and Iran were having direct negotiations about releasing the hostages. 10 days later, Saddam invades Iran. We were surprised. We had not anticipated that he was going to do that. We knew there was fighting going on down on the front, but this massive invasion was not really anticipated. There may have been people in the United States who calculated, but at the time I was in a fairly significant position. I was sitting in the White House with access to all the best intelligence we had, and I was surprised, and so was Brzezinski, because I know that morning I went over and talked to him when we learned about the invasion, and he was as surprised as I was, and thinking about what the implications would be.
We did not cause the war. Iran and Iraq went to war with each other for their own reasons. And they had been warring with each other for thousands of years under different governments, regimes, kings, etc., etc. There was nothing new in these hostilities. The only thing new about it was the amount of destruction that modern weaponry allowed them to cause to each other. It was no longer swords and scimitars and daggers and catapults throwing stones across city walls. These were airplanes bombing cities and towns, and these were sort of massive armaments devastating whole areas.
جنگ رو اصلا پیامد اشغال سفارت نمیدونم. جنگ پیامد انقلابه. ما موقعی که انقلاب کردیم طبیعتاً مهمترین متحد آمریکا رو در ایران از صحنه قدرت زدیم کنار، یعنی انقلاب زد کنار و یه رژیمی جایگزین اون کرد که کاملا یک رژیم ضد آمریکایی بود. یعنی ایران در رابطه با آمریکا 180 درجه تغییر مسیر داد و تغییر جهت داد. مهمترین متحدش مهمترین دشمنش شد در منطقه.
And during that time, after Iran made that decision, people in Washington began to be concerned that Iran would actually win this war. That is, that they would go across, they would defeat the Iraqi forces, they would take over all of Iraq and become a much, much more powerful country in the region. And at that point, the United States began actually directly assisting Saddam Hussein, and they did. They provided him with good intelligence and other information. Mostly, they didn't provide many weapons because Iraq had plenty of weapons from the Russians and from the French and others. But the United States did actively engage on the side of Iraq, and by the end of the war, when we had done the reflagging operation and American forces were protecting shipping up and down the Gulf. By the end of that war, we were actually participating on the side of Iraq. But people forget that at the beginning, we didn't. We actually were neutral in this process. And I realize that Iranians don't believe this. It's part of the narrative that the Americans told Saddam to go and invade Iran. We didn't.
موش‌های برافراشته ملت بر تمام سلاح‌های شرق و غرب غلبه کرد و بعد از این نیز کار شما، حرکت شما الگویی خواهد بود برای همه مستضعفان جهان. و این پیروزی به خوبی نشان میده اون پیشبینی امام امت رو که صدام باید برود. ایشون گفتن و صدام خواهد رفت.
In those days, of course, I was not even aware of the extent to which we were helping Saddam Hussein, to the extent we were giving him precursor chemicals to use on the battlefield, the extent to which we were egging him on. And as it all turned out, of course, after 9 very hard years, the invasion of Iran by Iraq turned into a stalemate, and the war sort of just petered out. So that was very much on the front burner, and of course we were working with the aftermath of the revolution in Iran in 1979, where the U.S. favorite, the Shah, was deposed and given entree into the United States, causing all manner of reaction in Iran, which exists to this day, not only in Iran, but in the very bitter reaction on the part of the United States to the hostage-taking and other indignities that were inflicted on U.S. citizens and diplomats by the new regime in Tehran. It's no secret that we had all manner of contacts with the Iraqis in those days. There's the famous picture of Donald Rumsfeld shaking hands with Saddam Hussein. So Rumsfeld and others were involved in this rather untoward effort to incite or to make sure that Saddam Hussein, who was the beneficiary of much of the information we gave the Iraqis, that he would give Iran a bloody nose. It was not a very smart policy. It was vindictive. It was part and parcel of the fact that the United States and Great Britain really didn't like the notion that our favorite Shah of Iran was unceremoniously removed, and that the new Iranian leaders didn't seem to have the appropriate respect, so to speak, for the sole remaining superpower in the world.
I think that the support given to Saddam by the United States was a big policy error, and that it has had huge consequences. But it's a policy error that derived from the almost irrational intensity of American reactions to the hostage crisis. I mean, it is, even today, I think it's hard to believe that the United States has good relations with Vietnam when we lost, well over 50,000 lives in fighting a war against the current government. Whereas we can't get along with Iran because for 400 some days, some people were held prisoner and nobody was hurt. But that was just a searing moment, and it was it's something that remains as a big blockage between the United States and Iran to this day.